we're going to move on to another video from Alliant Energy. This one deals with avian surveys that they've been conducting in connection with their wind farm. And it incorporates a dog in the video. And who doesn't love a dog? They use a dog for detection at their Whispering Willow wind farm. And they've been using dogs to help with their avian surveys. You can find this and more stories about Alliant Energy and their corporate responsibility with links from our WUI Facebook page. And with that, we're going to queue up the video, hopefully.
At Alliant Energy, we use resources wisely, care for the environment, and work to continuously improve ourselves and our company. We continue to accelerate our transition to renewable energy as part of our effort to achieve our sustainability goals and provide a clean energy future for our customers. Over the past few years, we've built several new wind farms that have made our company one of the largest utility owner-operators of wind in the United States. Renewable energy like wind power is cleaner than traditional energy sources, and it's more sustainable for our customers, communities, and the world around us. However, all forms of energy generation have some environmental impact.
With wind and solar, we're finding that there are land use issues we have to manage, as well as wildlife issues that we've never had to face before in the form of bird and bat interaction. So this is something that we're spending a lot of time in the industry acknowledging and trying to figure out the best solutions for to minimize our impacts to those natural resources.
While wind farms do have some impacts to the world around us, they are considerably less than traditional generation, and we can take actions to reduce those impacts. With wind turbine operation, there are potential concerns with them coexisting with our avian friends. We can decrease our impact on birds and bats by locating wind turbines where the populations are smaller. One way we are working to reduce the environmental impact of our wind farms is through conducting bird fatality monitoring. We've begun piloting the idea of using detection dog teams at our Whispering Willow wind farm near Hampton, Iowa.
What we've heard and what we've seen from these detection dog teams, that they have a very high efficiency rating, which enables them to get good results that can then be highly validated for our use in these plans that we work with Fish and Wildlife. And we feel fully confident they'll work.
In an effort to get better reportable data on wildlife impacts, we engaged a firm called West to conduct bird and bat surveys at some of our Iowa wind farms. The company has conducted bird and bat surveys for many years, but just recently began using dogs for them.
We've been conducting dog-assisted surveys since 2018, working mostly at wind projects throughout several Midwestern states. The work we're doing at Whispering Willow is part of the post-construction monitoring. We're searching areas around the turbines to gather information about potential impacts to birds and bats. One of the key characteristics for a successful detection dog is that it loves to have something to do. This is a dog that is high energy, enjoys playing fetch or tug, for example, or simply enjoys learning new skills and interacting with their person. The dog's sense of smell is much better than ours, and visually searching for things can be difficult or impossible in some circumstances.
The dog detection teams we're using at Whispering Willow Wind Farm will help us gather data as we put together a habitat conservation plan for all of our wind farms in Iowa and Minnesota. The Habitat Conservation Plan will take several years to assemble, and it will support our efforts to mitigate the impact our wind farms have on wildlife. It's part of how we're living our value of acting for tomorrow.
With that, we're going to turn to another one of our guest speakers, James Ripp, who is the Director of Regulatory Strategy and Solutions for the Alliant Energy Company. Jeff previously worked at the Public Service Commission in Wisconsin Also, a period of time with the House of Representatives Committee on Resources, the Wisconsin Legislative Audit Bureau, and the Department of Natural Resources. He graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and has a master's degree in water resource management and a BS degree in chemistry and environmental studies. And Jeff's going to talk to us a little bit about the latest developments in renewable generation, battery technology, and electric vehicles, and with a focus on what's going on at Alliant Energy. Jeff, thank you for being with us.
Good morning, James. Thank you for that introduction. Can you hear me okay?
We sure can.
Great. Well, I'm really pleased to be able to talk to Wisconsin utility investors today. As James noted, my role at Alliant Energy is regulatory strategy and solutions. I primarily am engaged with the state regulators in Wisconsin and Iowa for our two operating companies. My role includes rate case filings, major construction dockets, customer service issues, handling customer complaints, and then working through all those other regulatory issues. And you're correct. I did work at the Public Service Commission before I came to Alliant. I've been here about 3 years. Most recently at my role at the commission I was the division administrator for the energy regulatory division that was responsible for all natural gas and electric regulation. It was and James, thank you for that great introduction on sort of the state of the market for utility investments. I think that was a perfect lead in to the things that I want to talk about today. I don't have a presentation. I think that video that you shared with the dogs was great. I know we have a lot of other materials out on our website, and certainly we'll talk about some of the things that we're doing here today. At Alliant, our purpose is to serve customers and build strong communities. And this purpose really does guide us every single day in the decisions that we make. And it's been especially important in 2020. It's been a challenging year. I think, I was invited to speak today a little bit about the major changes that are occurring in the energy industry. James talked about those as transition, particularly from fossil fuel related generation to renewables, where battery technology is going, electric vehicles, and I'll hit on those. But I also want to focus on sort of the backdrop of what's happening in the economy and how that's, impacting the strategy. And certainly this transformation is happening really quickly. And, 10 years ago, I don't think you saw the prices on James's slide. If it would have been tough to predict 10 years ago where the price of renewables would be today. And so I think trying to keep up with the market of where renewables are going as we make investments in these long-lived assets is really important. And so that has been a big focus of ours, and as many utilities as well. And looking at those opportunities to really change the cost profile for the customer and making our investments in a way that are leading to those lower cost electric prices for all customers. And that helps really drive economic growth in the state of Wisconsin. And that's important. This year has been particularly challenging though with the pandemic. I do want to talk a little bit about sort of how we're addressing that, because I think it's indicative, particularly for investors, to think about, the impacts that this has had on our business. We're addressing it. I think we're addressing it successfully, but certainly it's a challenge for many of our customers still. And then on top of that, in August, the derecho storm in Iowa, which was essentially a hurricane in the Midwest, left more than 250,000 Alliant Energy customers without power, many of them for more than a week. Those have been some pretty significant challenges for us this year. But despite those challenges, we're continuing to implement what we call our clean energy blueprint. And this is really our strategy for transitioning from fossil generation to these renewable energy. The pandemic hit us all hard. We moved quickly at Alliant Energy to do the right thing for customers. And we, even before the regulators required us to implement a moratorium on customer disconnections, we moved to stop all customer disconnections for non-payment, recognizing that many of our customers, particularly residential customers, were either in a work from home environment, or they lost their jobs, or potentially were quarantined at home And we did not want to be in a position of having to disconnect customers that were in that situation. And then, our foundation really kicked in as well, making donations to food banks and through United Way. We have a foundation supported fund at Alliant called the Hometown Cares Fund. Retirees, employees all make contributions into this fund as well. And those dollars are then used to help low-income customers pay their bills to manage their so we don't have a large arrears in customers. We had $1 million both for Iowa and Wisconsin that we donated earlier this year for that. And then probably most significantly and recently, you saw that the commission had approved our rate stabilization filing in Wisconsin, which really was a plan to hold rates steady for another year. Typically in Wisconsin, we file rate cases every 2 years. This would have been our year to file a case. And we just didn't think that was the right thing to do, was to file for a rate increase at the beginning of the pandemic. So we worked really hard as a company to manage costs. And this was despite the fact that we have brought online this year some significant investments that did change our rate base. West Riverside plant down in Beloit, which is a 700 megawatt natural gas plant, state of the art, and some natural gas investments up in our northern western part of our service territory to really drive economic growth in the state. So we were able to do that, bring those in, and begin earning on those investments while keeping rates flat for customers during the pandemic. I think one of the other things that's been interesting is how quickly our company has adapted to work from home and how successful we've been able to do this transition. It really has accelerated the use of technology like this meeting here, Zoom. I know I spend a lot of time on Zoom or WebEx or GoToMeeting or, you name it, I've been on it. I think they all work well. We currently have about half our workforce working from home. This includes most of the, general support services, accounting, legal, regulatory. In the field, we are taking very strong steps to protect the safety of our employees. And for a company of our side, we really haven't had a lot of issues with employees getting sick. And we're also protecting customers. So when our crews are out in the field, they are wearing protective equipment, masks, face shields. When we have to get into a customer's house, we're making sure we're doing that in a very safe way. And we'll continue to do that. And at our critical operation centers that control the distribution system or generating resources, we're being very careful on how we allow in, outside contractors or others that could potentially increase some risk for our employees. So I think we've been very successful. We do see that this work from home to continue through the end of the year for the majority of our office employees. And then we'll be evaluating what that looks like going forward. But I think certainly what we're seeing is we can get the work done that needs to get done in a different way and make use of some of the new technology. Early on in the pandemic, I think there was some concern about what was happening to our electric sales, particularly for commercial and industrial customers. Residential sales increased. I think that was seen across the board for most utilities as more of our customers were working from home. The initial downturn in commercial industrial really has moderated a little bit. I think, we've seen some rebound here in this July-August timeframe, and I think at our last, quarterly, we had been forecasting about a 5%, reduction in sales overall, weather normalized. I think that will improve. I think at our next quarterly, investor call, we'll be talking about what that looks like now. And we've made significant progress anyway to mitigate the impact of those sales declines by advancing and accelerating some of our transformation efforts to reduce costs. This includes things on the energy delivery side of automation. Certainly, we're not traveling as much as a company. We're using a lot more of this type of technology. So we have reaffirmed our earnings guidance with a midpoint of $2.41 a share and our 2020 common dividend target of $1.52. So even with the pandemic challenges, I think we're still on track to hit our financial goals for the year. to the extent that people want to talk about sort of the derecho in Iowa and the impact, I think I'm happy to answer questions. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that, but just let me say that the work that we did to rebuild that system in about 2 weeks was typically the amount of work that crews would do in a year. We replaced over 3,600 poles, 6 million feet of wire. The city of Cedar Rapids in particular was devastated by this storm, and it was truly a huge effort to bring it back. And we owe a debt of thanks to many of our fellow utility companies who provided crews, and even the Iowa National Guard, who was instrumental in helping clear the damage from that storm. I think they removed over 28 million pounds of debris in just clearing the streets so we could get our trucks in to repair the system. I think, James, you had mentioned our corporate responsibility report, and I think that's a great place to start about this transition of renewables and electric vehicles, batteries. In July, we did update our corporate responsibility report that advanced some of our sustainability goals for the company. We've announced that by 2030, we will have a 50% reduction in CO2 emissions, which is 10% over the prior goal. By 2040, we expect to have eliminated all coal from the fleet, and that's 10 years faster than our previous target. And then the new piece there was an aspirational goal of net zero by 2050, which is similar to others in the industry. I think we're all trying to figure out how we do that. Certainly investment in natural gas is part of our system, and it's going to be an important backbone for our system for a while. But as we look out to 2050, what new technologies will be there 30 years from now to help us achieve these goals? That's where we're really focused as a company. That corporate responsibility report, I think the story about the dogs is interesting, right? And there's some other interesting stories like that in that report. So I'd encourage you to take a look. That's available on our website. Particularly some of the things we're doing to invest in those communities that we serve, to build more equitable, respectful, and resilient communities. We're investing in programs that focus on social justice, education, housing, and the environment. And we're really focused on trying to create a more diverse workforce where all of our employees are welcome and they have a diverse background and talents, and they can use them to the fullest potential. So all of that's kind of laid out in there. And then the other big piece is this clean energy blueprint that I mentioned, which really is our roadmap that's guiding the transition to renewable energy. So I think James Thalacker had explained, renewable energy is now cost competitive. It's cheaper than it was. It's cost competitive with traditional fossil investment. But that doesn't mean that it's free. And so, when you look at how utilities invest in renewables over the long term, and there's a net present value to those investments, but the investments are lumpy and the impacts to customers also can be lumpy. And so as we're doing this transition, we're trying to do it in a way that doesn't result in significant rate increases or rate shock to customers as we retire certain facilities or bring renewable facilities online. And that's really the challenge going forward. And those investments that we're making certainly are resulting in lower O&M and fuel costs, and that does give us some headroom to be able to make some additional capital investments. Our blueprint includes not only the generation side, though, but also investment in the grid and in integrating the grid, both for what we're doing as a company with our renewable energy and battery investments, but also what our customers are doing. Just a few highlights of the blueprint, I think, and we're undertaking a similar process in Iowa right now. I think Wisconsin, we completed our blueprint planning last year, and now we're beginning to implement. In May, we did announce plans to retire the Edgewater generating station. The last unit there, Unit 5, about 400 megawatts of coal by the end of 2022. This has been a important resource for us for many, many years. The investments we made there have served customers well. But as we look forward, we see an opportunity to replace that coal with solar, and we'll talk a little bit about that. We announced this well in advance. We wanted to be able to work with our customers and with the community on the plant retirement. We wanted employees to have the time to evaluate career options, enhance their skill set, and potentially keep as many of those plant employees with our company as we can. And then working with the community, that particular site there up in Sheboygan, where Edgewater is located, is on the lakefront. I think it's some valuable real estate. And so we do intend to work with the community on what to do as we redevelop that site. And hopefully by next year, I'll be able, if you ask me, I'd be able to give you an update on what's happening up there. Also in May, we brought online the 700 megawatt West Riverside Energy Center. This is a combined cycle state-of-the-art natural gas facility, about $670 million. Since the spring of 2017, when we started construction there, more than 1,000 jobs, 1,000 people worked on that site, millions of dollars in the local economy. It is going to result in shared utility revenue payments to Rock County and that area by about $3 million. And it will continue to employ more people in that community. So it's a big investment. And those state-of-the-art combined cycle plants really are helpful as we bring on more renewables and retire coal, just because of the operating characteristics of those facilities. We're able to ramp them up quicker to fill the gaps when the intermittent resources aren't working. And we are going to add some solar at that plant as well. And that was approved by the commission. It's a relatively small project, and that solar is actually going to be used on site for plant uses. But what that does is it allows us to boost the output of the plant onto the grid, and that'll be completed next year. Last October, this was the big headline though, was we announced that Alliant Energy was going to install 1,000 megawatts of solar in Wisconsin by the end of 2023. These projects, our first sort of tranche of those projects, we announced in May when we applied with the Public Service Commission that we wanted to acquire 6 separate projects worth about $780 million for Alliant Energy, all of them to be placed in service by the end of 2023. The story that we've been able to describe to the commission is how these investments will lower costs in the long term. And again, this is going to spur some significant economic growth in the communities where these are located. And I think right now, particularly given where we're at with the pandemic, making sure that we're creating these jobs and trying to employ local workers and resources to the extent we can. These projects will create about 80 million in local tax revenue over 30 years, and we expect about 1,200 construction jobs total. Once they're operational, the energy from these solar projects is going to power about 175,000 homes. The application is pending in front of the commission right now, and we do expect, ruling early next year. One we're hoping for by the Public Service Commission. One of the questions that I can get asked is, are you installing batteries at these solar projects? And the answer is no, not yet. What we see with battery technology is there's a lot of ways that electric companies can use batteries to enhance the service that we're providing to our customers. Certainly there's support for intermittent generation, right? You can store the energy that the solar panels are providing when the sun is shining, and then release it when it's needed. But also reliability and resiliency are important components of this for voltage management regulation. And that's where you're seeing it used as sort of an alternative to distribution system investments. Whereas in the past, we maybe would have had to upgrade a transformer. Now we can use a battery, and maybe that's a cheaper way to solve a problem. Each of those use cases for batteries has a different economic profile for the utility. And so generally using batteries to supply bulk power in Wisconsin right now is not cost effective. But there are some use cases where it makes sense. And I can talk a little bit about those projects. In particular, we have a project, not in Wisconsin, but in Decorah, Iowa. It's about a 2.5 megawatt 2.9 megawatt hour battery that we're using in Decorah. And down in Decorah, Iowa, we do have a lot of customer owned solar, rooftop solar. We looked at this as a solution for how we could avoid making some distribution investments in the wires, and we think that this will actually extend the life of some of our distribution facilities in a much more cost-effective way. We announced that project in July, looking to have it in service by early 2021. We have a smaller project up in Wisconsin near Sauk City. We worked with DNR on a facility they have up there. It's fairly remote. It was at the end of a very old distribution line, and when you look at the cost of rebuilding that distribution line, it would have been just cost prohibitive for us to do that to serve that customer. So we worked on what we call a microgrid solution for them, where that property is now served by a small solar array and battery. So it's essentially off the grid. And by doing that, we were able to reduce the cost to serve that customer. So they continue to pay us rates, but we're managing and operating that facility for them. And that just kind of demonstrates how the changing nature of our distribution business is going. We're going to have a lot of different situations and a lot of different ways to serve customers. And that's really where we're focused on. Where can we make those investments in a way that lowers costs for customers, that's creative, that's innovative, and how can we use the technology that's available in the market? There's a handful of other projects in Iowa too. They're all out there on our Clean Energy Blueprint website. You can look at that. We will be, as we learn how these projects are deployed, we'll be doing more in Wisconsin as well. I guess the last thing I want to just hit on is sort of electric vehicles. And I'm not sure, I joined a little late, so I don't know if you've talked about electric vehicles yet today at the conference. So maybe just nod if you have, and I'll skip over some of the background.
We talked only about the NSP proposal.
Sure.
Brief.
Okay, good. Well, that's helpful. Yeah, and the commission approved that proposal, which I thought was very creative and innovative, and I applaud Excel for moving that forward. The Public Service Commission liked it as well, I think, and they recently issued an order for utilities to all put together an electrification plan and file that with the commission by May of 2021. There's a number of different things that we have been working on, even before that order, and certainly it's no secret that electric vehicles are becoming more cost competitive. As they get mass produced, as more customers buy them, the costs are going to continue to come down, and the cost of ownership of those vehicles is less over the lifetime. You don't have oil changes, you don't have the moving parts that you have in a combustion engine. The cost of electricity is generally cheaper than gasoline. So once we get to the point where these things are produced at a scale where the price point's down, really it will become a question of, is there sufficient infrastructure for people to feel comfortable? I think you've heard of the range anxiety concerns. If I drive up to my cabin in northern Wisconsin, am I going to be able to get home? I think people do feel that that's a challenge to overcome. The reality is, though, most of the charging is going to occur at people's homes and workplaces. It's not going to be at roadside charging stations, I think. So, as we're looking at our EV strategy, and certainly we're going to work with the commission on helping define what the role of the utility is, our strategy really is focused on helping our customers and the communities figure out what infrastructure they need to support their community. And it may be less about us actually owning chargers, right? We want to facilitate the deployment of charger infrastructure. And certainly there's going to be areas where it may make sense for the utility to own chargers, and we'll be there. But the reality is we want to be able to build the distribution system to support this incredible amount of energy that's going to be needed to supply the electric fleet. There's a lot of work to be done there. There's a lot of investments to be made on that side of it. We do own a few chargers already, certainly at our facilities, here in Madison at our headquarters. We have a number of public charging. Employees can use them, or the public can use them to charge their vehicle. We just installed some chargers up in Fond du Lac and in Beaver Dam, working with DeForest over by the new athletic complex just north of Madison. On that whole complex, we worked with them on LED lighting and electric vehicle charging and energy efficiency. But really we're focusing on fleet. And so first of all, it's like, how do we electrify our fleet? And how do we work with customers who manage a fleet that they can install, electric chargers at their workplace and help electrify their fleets. So that's really where we've been focusing as a company. Also working on electrification beyond just transportation. We have a customer that we worked with that built a new distribution facility in our service territory. And rather than using propane powered forklifts, we went to an electric forklift fleet for them. Saved them a lot of money. Payback was really quick. They're very happy. And then truck refrigeration units is another area that we focus. Certainly for Alliant, we do have a non-regulated business, Trevero, which is a logistics and transportation company. We're in that space. We understand that space, and that's an area where we're also working. We see opportunities for electric buses, whether it's a school bus fleet or municipal fleets. And so we're continuing to push for pilots to help us learn about how we can use those. And then sort of the vision that people have down the road is, can these batteries on these fleet vehicles provide a role for grid support services? I think that's a ways down the road yet. But certainly you can imagine a world where there's enough batteries connected to a charger somewhere that we can use that to help meet some of the needs of the electric system. So anyway, I think that was a lot of information in just a short period of time. I do just want to reiterate by saying, Alliant Energy, our purpose is to serve customers and build communities. Hopefully some of the things that I talked about today gave you a sense of how we're doing that. Really this purpose guides us in the decisions we're making. And we are committed to investing in renewables. The 1,000 megawatts of solar in Wisconsin, when that's done, Alliant will be the single largest owner and operator of solar. And that's on the top of the investments we've made in Iowa. We're completing 1,000 megawatts of wind investment in Iowa this year, primarily for our Iowa utility, but with the Wisconsin utility also owns some of that wind. So we've moved in a big way, and we're moving quickly, and it definitely keeps me busy in my job. So with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, I think we do have one question for you. If you click on the Q&A tab
Sure.
at the bottom of your screen, it should come up for you. The last question there is for you.
So yeah, okay. Is Alliant thinking of collaborating with communities and building solar plus storage facilities like it did with the Wisconsin State Park? How about sharing ownership of these developments so that communities will have more incentives? So yes, I think we have a lot of collaborations going with our communities, and each community has different needs or different interests. But certainly we are looking this year yet to deploy some community solar projects throughout our service territory. We have opportunities to work and partner with our customers on a customer hosted sort of renewable package solution, and that's one. And I think the last part of that question is letting customers sort of make these investments on their own. And certainly we that happens, and we know that's going to happen. And to the extent we can support our customers, we try to make that process easy for them. I think it did come up before that there is a cost to having customers leave our system and build their own generation. And that is an area of active policy discussion of what is the correct compensation that the utility pays for private generation, and what's the appropriate charges for private generators to pay the utility to have access to be able to sell that power onto the grid. There's going to be a lot of discussion about that in the coming years. Continues to be a hot topic of active policy. There's to the extent that we get the pricing right, and that we're not disadvantaging our other customers, I think utilities will look at how do we partner with customers even more in the future.
I think that's pretty much all the time we have for questions at this point, but thank you for joining us, Jeff. We really appreciate taking the time, and we appreciate all the valuable information you provided.
Yeah.
And with that,
all right, well,
we've got a couple more. You bet. With that, we've got a couple more videos we want to show. They're very brief, and then we're going to have the drawing for a brand new iPad for all of those that have registered. Your name is in the drawing, and one of you is going to win the brand new iPad. So with that, let's introduce the next video. It's provided by WEC and WPS, and it involves the construction of the Two Creeks Solar Park, which is being built in eastern Wisconsin, northeastern Wisconsin. And we're going to take a look at how it's taking shape and how it'll provide cleaner energy for the future and for the customers and the communities in the surrounding area. All right.
There is very few times that I'm addressing groups that I'd say it's historic. This is historic. This is a historic day for Wisconsin. This project itself at Two Creeks alone will provide more than double the amount of energy we produce for solar in 2018.
Great, and we have one more quick video that should be quite interesting from American Transmission Company, and it involves the use of a heavy lift helicopter in the construction of the Badger Coulee transmission line system. So it should be good, interesting footage.
Early Wisconsin morning, a host of Badger Coulee project construction contractors, including Henkel's and McCoy and Erickson Air Crane, convene at a helicopter landing zone near the project right-of-way. As the morning mist clears, construction team leaders detail the challenging task ahead. Teamwork, attentiveness, communication, and safety are paramount. Each member of the extensive crew prepares for the day, mobilizing to their work locations on the right-of-way, in the helicopter, at the landing zone, or at the road crossings. The Erickson crew prepares the air crane by fueling, cleaning, evaluating the engine systems, and conducting pre-flight safety checks. Hovering just above the staging area where a small crew has assembled, the winds intensify as the air crane operator works with the construction team below to safely secure pole sections. The structures along this construction segment were installed using two types of designs. Structure segments can be designed to either be bolted together or slipped together. When this is done with the use of an air crane, diamond guides, which look like triangles at the top of each structure section, are used to assist crews with aerial installation. Next, the middle sections of the structures are installed. There can be 2 or 3 middle sections depending on structure size and design. While slip joints were used along the line, the bolted-on flange joints were needed in some areas that have a potential for high axial loads, specifically uplift. Flange joints are also used in areas with structure height limits, such as Federal Aviation Administration imposed limits or vertical phase-to-phase spacing in compact designs. Designed, planned, and ultimately executed with skill and precision, the air crane follows a pre-planned flight pattern and structure section picking order. In addition to bolted-on flange joint structures, slip joint structures also were installed with the use of a diamond guide. The air crane pilot is then able to lower the structure sections that slip together on top of one another. The air crane crew is in constant communication with ground crews in order to ensure a successful operation. Ground crews refuel the air crane throughout the day. Returning to the staging area, the air crane flight crew picks up the top section of the structure. The operator and pilots work in harmony to align the slip joints. This takes marked precision and constant communication among the crew. After pole installation is complete, smaller helicopters are used to install pull ropes, which ground crews use, along with winch systems, to pull the heavier transmission line wires into place. Badger Coulee crews worked with helicopter contractor Ericsson to set 43 transmission line structures in 4 days along the last project construction segment. The heavy lift helicopter used for construction saved weeks of construction time and made it possible to access challenging areas with hilly terrain. The project, which was placed in service in December 2018, electrically connects the Dane County, Wisconsin area with the La Crosse County, Wisconsin area. It is an important part of the electric transmission grid in the state and will improve electric reliability, provide access to lower cost power, and help deliver renewable energy.
Okay, well, that pretty much concludes our program. We do have one last thing to do, which is the drawing. And again, this is a drawing for a brand new iPad, which will be shipped directly to our winner. And the winner is David Wanner, W-A-N-N-E-R. And again, the iPad will be shipped directly to you, David. And thank you for participating. And thank you to everybody for participating in this first ever virtual annual meeting of the Wisconsin Utility Investors. Thanks again and have a good afternoon.